Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I spent 8 years of my life working at a major bookstore chain, and I loved every minute of it. The smell of new books, helping customers find their next favorite read, and being surrounded by literature all day, it was perfect. But when an opportunity came up for a Monday to Friday office job that paid significantly better, I had to take it. Still, I couldn't stay away from bookstores completely. Even after leaving, I found myself regularly visiting different branches of my old workplace. There was something comforting about browsing the shelves and catching up with former colleagues who were still around. This story happened about 3 years after I'd left the job. I was at my old store, the one in the fancy part of town where all the wealthy neighborhoods converged. I was dressed casually, just jeans and my university sweatshirt, with my purse over my shoulder and my earbuds in, listening to some heavy metal. The store had gone through several staff turnovers since my time there, and I only recognized a handful of faces. While I was browsing the science fiction section, one of the current employees came over to help. We had a great chat about books, and I mentioned that I used to work there. He recommended some excellent titles, and I added them to my growing pile. I had a strict limit of 5 books or $60, whichever came first. That's when it happened. I felt someone poking me hard in the back with what felt like a plastic nail. A shrill voice demanded my attention in an exaggerated, drawn-out way. I turned around to see a woman with bleached blonde hair and a bob cut, wearing workout clothes and pristine white sneakers. Her husband stood behind her, looking uncomfortable with his hands in his pockets. I removed one earbud and asked her what she wanted. She immediately criticized my greeting, calling it rude. I shot back with a comment about her own rudeness. She demanded to know what I'd said to her, her voice rising with indignation. I asked what she wanted while informing her that I didn't work there. She insisted that I did, saying she'd heard me talking with the employee about working there. She then thrust her phone in my face, showing a picture of some book she wanted. I tried to explain again that I didn't work there anymore and asked her to back off. She became more agitated, insisting that I had to help her because she was a paying customer. When I stated that I didn't have to do anything, I turned away to continue shopping. That's when she grabbed my hoodie and yanked me backward. I confronted her about her behavior, pointing out my casual clothes, purse, and headphones as evidence that I wasn't an employee. She claimed she'd seen me working there before. When I explained that was years ago, she made a bizarre statement about me still being obligated to help her because of the code. Confused, I asked her what she meant. She went on about some mysterious code and threatened to get me banned and fined by speaking to my manager. I looked at her husband, but he just stared at the floor. This woman was clearly living in some alternate reality where former retail workers were bound by some mystical code of eternal service. I decided to call her bluff and agreed to get a manager, telling her I'd love to see how this played out. I waved down an employee and requested a manager. When he arrived, he had a thick beard and an expression that said he'd seen it all. The manager asked about the problem, and Karen launched into an angry tirade, accusing me of insulting her and refusing to help, using quite colorful language. The manager had to ask her to lower her voice and watch her language before turning to hear my side of the story. After I explained everything, trying not to smile too much, the manager addressed Karen. He explained that I didn't work there, and while he could help her find her book, she couldn't go around harassing people, regardless of their employment status. Karen responded with more yelling about how ridiculous the situation was and threatened to report everyone. The manager then gave her 3 options: calm down and accept his help, continue her behavior, and get banned, or leave immediately. Karen made her choice by declaring that she would contact corporate about all of us. She stormed out, practically dragging her silent husband behind her. The manager then turned to me with a grin and apologized for the incident, offering to let me use his employee discount. I ended up getting all 5 books at a great price. Later, as I sat at a nearby restaurant enjoying my lunch and new books, I couldn't help but wonder about this mysterious code Karen thought existed. Maybe it was written in some secret retail worker handbook that only entitled customers knew about. Whatever it was, at least I got a good story and some discounted books out of it. I've been a registered nurse for 8 years, working in the pediatric ward. After my maternity leave ended, I decided to work part-time so I could spend more time with my 3-month-old daughter. My husband and I agreed this would be best for our family, even though it meant some financial adjustments. That Wednesday afternoon was beautiful, and since I had the day off, I decided to take my daughter to the park. We'd been cooped up inside for days due to bad weather, and I thought some fresh air would do us both good. I found a quiet spot away from the playground, settling on a bench beneath a large oak tree. My daughter started getting fussy, her usual sign that she was hungry. I had brought a bottle of expressed milk, but she refused it, preferring to nurse directly. I took out my nursing cover and positioned her carefully, making sure we were both comfortable and discreet. We were about 10 minutes into feeding when I heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel path. Looking up, I saw a woman marching toward us, dragging a preteen boy behind her. Her face was twisted into an expression of disgust. She immediately started yelling at me, calling what I was doing disgusting. I tried to ignore her, focusing on my daughter instead, but she stepped closer, her shadow falling over us. She demanded my attention, pointing out that there were children present. I tried to explain that I was just feeding my baby and was covered up, but she wouldn't listen. She screamed that I needed to do this at home in private and that I was going to traumatize her son. Her son, who looked about 12, was staring at the ground, his face red with embarrassment. When I said I had every right to feed my child here and that I was being discreet, she became even more enraged. She started ranting about her own rights and her son's right to not see what she called filth in public. She was getting louder, attracting attention from other park goers. I felt my face burning with humiliation, but I stood my ground. I pleaded with her to leave us alone, explaining that we weren't bothering anyone. She disagreed violently, insisting that we were bothering both her and her son. She then started ranting about how this was a public park and not my private feeding station. Then she did something I never expected. She reached out and shoved my shoulder hard enough to make me sway. My daughter let out a startled cry and I clutched her tighter. She demanded that I pack up my things and leave immediately, shoving me again, this time nearly causing me to lose my balance. I was terrified, not for myself, but for my daughter. That's when I heard my husband's voice commanding her to stop. He was running toward us, already reaching for his badge. He had dropped me off earlier and was supposed to pick us up in an hour, but he must have decided to join us early. He identified himself as police and ordered her to step away from his wife and child. She responded by accusing us all of being perverts. When she tried to shove me again, my husband caught her arm and told her she was under arrest for assault. She refused to believe he could arrest her, claiming she was just protecting her son from indecency. But my husband already had her in handcuffs. Her son stood frozen, looking mortified. She continued to resist, screaming about how this was assault and threatening to take away my husband's badge. 2 patrol cars arrived within minutes. My husband had called for backup the moment he saw what was happening. When they led her away, she was still screaming about her rights and threatening to sue everyone. The responding officers took statements from several witnesses who had recorded the incident on their phones. Karen's son quietly apologized before being picked up by his father, who looked like this wasn't the first time he'd had to deal with such a situation. She was charged with assault and disorderly conduct, and the judge showed no sympathy for her claims of protecting public decency. She got community service and mandatory anger management classes. A week later, I was back at the same park in the same spot, feeding my daughter. This time, a young mother sat down nearby and expressed her gratitude for my standing up to Karen. Apparently, the incident had made local news, and several mothers' groups had organized public breastfeeding awareness events in response. I grew up in a pretty sheltered environment in a small town. My parents were protective, and I rarely ventured far from home alone. That changed when I started college at 17. I was young for my year, having skipped a grade in elementary school. Despite my age, I'd always looked mature for my years, something that would later prove to be both a blessing and a curse. When I moved to college, it was my first real taste of independence. The campus was in a small college town about an hour away from my parents. Everything was new and exciting, but also a bit overwhelming. I was still adjusting to being away from home, learning to navigate this new chapter of my life. It was during my first month at college when the incident happened. I had walked to the local gas station near campus to grab a Red Bull for a late-night study session. It was one of those convenience store gas stations that sold everything from snacks to alcohol, which was why they typically only hired people over 21. I was browsing the energy drink section trying to decide which flavor to get when I heard someone asking if I had clocked in yet. I didn't think they were talking to me, so I continued looking at the drinks. That's when I felt a presence right behind me. I turned around to find this older man, probably in his 50s, standing way too close for comfort. The kind of close that makes your skin crawl. The owner started yelling at me, demanding that I get to the back room. He was angry, saying he didn't pay me to drink the store's products while on the clock. He even scolded me about not wearing my work shirt, insisting there was a dress code to follow. I tried to back away, holding my hands up defensively. My voice came out shaky and uncertain as I tried to explain that he was mistaking me for someone else. At least, that's what I think I said. My adrenaline was pumping so hard I could barely hear my own voice. Panic set in and I turned to leave, completely forgetting about the Red Bull still in my hand. That's when I felt it, a strong grip on my shoulder, yanking me back. He shouted for me to come back, his voice filled with authority and anger. Something snapped inside me. Pure instinct took over, and I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the 20-ounce Red Bull can right at his face. He ducked and let go of me, giving me the chance to bolt toward the door. I made it to my car but didn't get in. Instead, I stood there shaking, watching the store entrance. I didn't have a cell phone. This was before they were common for teenagers, and I had no idea what to do. My parents were an hour away, and I was alone in a situation I'd never imagined I'd be in. Then two things happened simultaneously. The owner came rushing out of the store, and a police car pulled into the parking lot. The officer was probably just stopping for a snack, but his timing couldn't have been better. The owner's demeanor changed completely when he saw the police car. Apparently, he'd just learned that the employee he'd mistaken me for had called in sick, but he hadn't gotten the message. He started apologizing profusely, trying to downplay the situation by claiming it was just a misunderstanding and that he had mistaken me for his employee. When I insisted on showing the security footage to the officer, the owner tried to discourage it by claiming the camera angle wouldn't show much, but the footage showed everything clearly. The officer called my parents, and after they arrived, we decided to press assault charges. Because I was a minor and he had physically grabbed me, the consequences were severe. He ended up losing his business and spent 4 months in prison. The truly unsettling part was learning about the employee he'd mistaken me for. When I finally saw a picture of her, it was like looking at an older version of myself. The resemblance was uncanny, same height, similar build, even similar features. If he had just handled the situation differently, asked me who I was instead of assuming and grabbing me, it would have been nothing more than an awkward mistake. I still think about that night sometimes, about how quickly a simple misunderstanding escalated into something so serious, about how differently things might have gone if I'd been more assertive, or if he'd been more professional, or if that police officer hadn't happened to pull up at exactly the right moment. But mostly I think about how a single moment of poor judgment changed multiple lives forever. I worked at a hardware store about 4 years ago. The pay wasn't great, but we sold tools at decent prices and I enjoyed the work. The best part was that we were right next door to a discount store where I'd grab lunch during my breaks. The stores had different uniforms. We wore navy blue shirts with a company name, while the discount store employees wore black. Being on the autism spectrum, I sometimes struggled with customer interactions, but my managers appreciated how I could usually keep my cool in tough situations. Plus, since I visited the discount store so often during my breaks and after work, I became good friends with many of their employees. I'd usually grab a $1 pork-flavored noodle bowl during my 10-minute break and sometimes pick up household items for my family too. One day during my break, I was at the discount store when an elderly woman in a wheelchair politely asked for my help. She was with her husband, who was wearing a World War II veteran hat. She needed assistance reaching some blankets on a high shelf, so I walked over and got them for her. The elderly woman was grateful and inquired about a specific bed model. I explained that I didn't actually work there, but at the hardware store next door. I mentioned that I often got mistaken for an employee since I still had my name tag on, but I was happy to help when I could. That's when Karen appeared. She demanded to know if I worked there. I politely explained that I didn't and was just helping other customers. Karen insisted that I must work there because I was wearing a name tag, claiming that only employees were allowed to wear them. I tried explaining that my manager had never told me to remove my name tag during breaks, and that I worked next door and was just getting lunch. Karen rudely declared that she didn't care if I was on lunch break, insisting that I worked there if a customer said so. Then she made a horrible comment about not understanding why anyone would help old bums unless they had to, especially ones she assumed were illegals. That comment made my blood boil. My stepdad is half Mexican and I was raised to respect my elders. I spent time caring for dying family members in their 90s when nobody else would. I looked at the elderly couple. The woman had tears in her eyes. I lost my composure and let loose on Karen. I called her stuck-up, entitled trash, and told her that her comments were disgusting. I pointed out that the man was a World War II veteran who appeared to be hard of hearing, and his wife was clearly in a wheelchair. I told her I hadn't expected to encounter such racist garbage while shopping, and added that if I did work there, I wouldn't serve her and would escort her out myself. Just then, I heard my manager calling me on the radio, and I noticed my friend who worked at the discount store peeking around the corner. Karen demanded to speak to my manager immediately. I grinned at my friend from the discount store and used my radio to call for a manager to aisle 10, reporting a rowdy customer causing a scene. My manager arrived and asked what was happening. Karen immediately accused me of cursing at her and demanded I be fired. After I explained the situation, including how she had insulted the elderly couple, my manager told her that he didn't care what his employees did when they weren't on the clock and in a different store. He added that she wouldn't be welcome in our store anymore. When Karen asked what he meant, he clarified that I didn't even work at the discount store. The discount store manager arrived and greeted me warmly. After hearing what happened and confirming the story with the elderly couple, who were still in tears, he also banned Karen from his store. Karen responded with a racial slur and declared she didn't care about being banned, saying she only came for nails and would just go next door for better prices anyway. My manager smiled and told her that she was banned from there too. When Karen protested that only a manager could do that, my manager simply told her to read his name tag. Karen stormed off, knocking over a sunglasses display on her way out. My manager gave me an extra 20 minutes of break time and mentioned that it was good Karen didn't know I was still on the clock during my breaks. Later that night, I went out for drinks with both managers and my friend from the discount store. We had a good laugh about how Karen managed to get herself banned from 2 stores in just 2 minutes. The elderly couple became regular customers at both stores, and we always made sure to help them whenever they needed it. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.